Welcome to the Klamath Armory Wrestling Podcast, the podcast that covers the history of pro wrestling at the Klamath Armory and Auditorium in Klamath Falls, Oregon. My name is Grant Bachoco, and now, on to the show. Episode 0, The Why of It All. In order to start this story, I have to tell you my story. When I was old enough to fly as an unaccompanied minor, my parents would put me on a plane from San Francisco International Airport to Klamath Falls Municipal Airport in Klamath Falls, Oregon. My mom grew up in Klamath Falls. My parents met there while they were in college attending the Oregon Institute of Technology, and my grandparents still live there. My grandfather worked at the Weyerhaeuser Lumber Mill. My grandmother worked as the attendance secretary at Hindley High School. I spent 2 weeks every summer in Klamath Falls, Oregon. I grew up with my cousins who lived there, and we'd go to the Lava Beds National Monument. We'd go camping at Sun Creek or Hart Mountain. I learned to swim in the municipal pool and splashed around in Wyard Park. I'd shop at Market Basket with my grandmother and Big R with my grandfather. I had Stagecoach Pizza with my cousins, and we'd go fishing at the pond at Taylor High's Ranch. And at least once a trip, we'd visit the Klamath County Museum. Though I never lived in Klamath Falls on any sort of permanent basis, it was and is a special place to me. My parents retired there, moving from San Francisco when they did, and I enjoy visiting them up there and seeing the changes that have taken place over the years. But this podcast is about wrestling. Pro wrestling. I was first introduced to the world of pro wrestling one morning in elementary school. We just entered the classroom, and I was sitting and getting situated for the day ahead when I heard an excited group of voices behind me. I turned around and saw that most of the other boys in the class were standing around my best friend Scott's desk. He sat right behind me. They were all gawking over something on his desk, and I looked down, and it was the program for WrestleMania. The first one. I'd never heard of pro wrestling or WrestleMania, but the excitement of my gathered classmates was infectious. I was quickly swept up. Scott had gone to WrestleMania. Well, he went to a closed-circuit venue in San Francisco to see it. The rest of the kids knew all the names of all the wrestlers in the program, and I did not. I started watching WWF on TV that very next weekend. I was hooked. My dad started taking me to matches, the first one being at the Oakland Coliseum in Oakland, California. I bought a Hot Rod shirt that night and stood for the Russian national anthem. I always liked the heels. And Jimmy Hart, the Mouth of the South, was my idol. I dressed as Jimmy Hart for career day in junior high school. But this podcast is about pro wrestling in Klamath Falls. I never saw any pro wrestling in Klamath Falls. I watched WWF when I visited during the summer. I played hours of Superstar Pro Wrestling in my grandparents' house, but I never saw any live matches in Klamath Falls, Oregon. In early January of 2025, the Klamath County Museum posted a picture on their Facebook page. It was a picture of a pro wrestling match happening in the Klamath Armory on February 20th, 1963. As a Klamath Falls, Oregon and pro wrestling fan, I was instantly hooked. I asked if they had any other information on who wrestled that night, and they posted a newspaper clipping of the results. Billy White Wolf wrestled Wild Bill Savage in the main event. While Googling around for more results, I came across the University of Oregon's Historic Oregon newspaper page, and I plunged down the rabbit hole, and my love for pro wrestling and Klamath Falls was reignited. This podcast is the result. What follows is a view of pro wrestling as told exclusively through the newspapers of Klamath Falls, mainly the News and the Herald, or the Evening Herald as it was called then. Sometimes I'll add other information from other sources for context, but I really wanted this project to be from the eyes of someone who only knew of the matches that happened at the Klamath Falls Armory. Yes, the wrestlers and promoter Mac Lillard wrestled and promoted elsewhere, but what follows is the view from the front row of the Klamath Armory in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Now, when I started this project, I started researching wrestling at the Armory in the year 1939. The storylines were fun, and the newspaper articles hooked me with their almost daily reports of the wrestling scene in Klamath Falls. But when I started looking into when wrestling started at the Klamath Armory, I discovered the first card took place on October 1st, 1935, 90 years ago. So I decided to go back to the start and cover wrestling at the Klamath Armory from day one. So settle in as we look back 90 years at the history of wrestling at the Klamath Armory in Klamath Falls, Oregon. That's going to do it for this episode of the Klamath Armory Wrestling Podcast. For links to the resources used for this episode, visit klamatharmory.com. This podcast is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible thanks to the support of the channel members over at the Solo Promoter YouTube channel. Consider supporting the show by becoming a member today. Visit solopromoter.com and click the join button for more information. You can also tell a fellow wrestling fan about the show or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for your support. The Klamath Armory Wrestling Podcast is copyright 2025 Saturday Morning Media Grant Pachoco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.